Welcome to the LOVE Unplugged podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Frigon. You may know me from Project Love, where we focus on operational excellence, but here we go deeper. We're your go-to for raw, empowering conversations on entrepreneurship and stepping into your CEO role with love and confidence. Each week, we'll explore everything from mindset shifts, leadership, optimal wellness, to efficient systems, all within a community of visionary women like you. Ready to get real about building a business and life you love? Hit subscribe and let's start this transformative journey together. Hello, loves. Today I am joined by the lovely Laura Larios. Laura is the founder and CEO of a highly sought-after consulting and coaching brand that delivers world-class nervous system and adrenal support for high-performing women in the corporate, network marketing, entrepreneurial, and coaching industries. Her signature methodology combines a blend of nervous system stabilization, somatic practices, adrenal support, and neuroscience that provides her high-level clients with greater stress optimization and the ability to grow their brand sustainably. She is a coach and consultant for one of Silicon Valley's top marketing companies, and she has appeared as a guest expert inside several of the coaching industry's top brands. Her training is in polyvagal theory, somatic experiencing, trauma, and neuroscience. So welcome, Laura. I am just so incredibly honored to have you as my guest. I'm so excited to learn all about your story and your advice. But before we dive into that, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about you personally so that those who don't know you yet can get to know you on a personal level.
Oh, thank you so much, Jessica, for having me. It's truly an honor to have these conversations with those who are as interested in the nervous system as you are. And I'm excited to be here. So there's a couple things I would like to share just first off. So my own experience with how I got into this work, and it was deeply personal. I think as for a lot of people, when they pursue something and later on becomes like their mission, essentially, it comes from something personally that they experienced. So I had a very difficult childhood that then led me into wanting to learn more about human behavior. So I became fascinated with psychology in high school, actually. And it gave me so much comfort when I started learning about how humans think and act and behave. And it was like I was trying to get a context for why I had experienced what I had experienced. And not only that, but also how can I help myself? Like, what are some ways to help me sort of recover from what I had experienced? So kind of went from, really studying as much psychology as I could get my hands on, and then decided I want to be a therapist. So I went to college and was pursuing that avenue. And I was really learning a lot, which was amazing, learning about trauma, learning about how our thoughts impact our body, and, sort of the neuroscience of things and burnout. But then at some point along the journey, I, realized I was kind of hitting a wall with some of the tools and methodologies that I was being taught in the program at the time. And just for myself, I was realizing like, okay, this has been helpful, but I'm still seeing certain patterns come up that I can't quite seem to move beyond. And I didn't know what it was. So I actually took a pause and decided to get curious and find out there must be something more to this than what I'm being shown at this very moment. And so I started researching other modalities outside of the cognitive behavioral model I was being taught in school, and which is essentially more like talk therapy. And I found Stephen Porges' work with the polyvagal theory. And he developed this theory in 1994. And everything started to make so much sense once I started to dive into his theory and what he was talking about in terms of the nervous system and how it impacts our brain, how it impacts our ability to connect with one another, our thought, like literally everything. It was like, it started to explain so much of my own traumas and behaviors and reactions to things, as well as other people in my life too. So things started to make sense. And so I just kept diving into it and wanted to learn more and more. And then that also led me to Peter Levine's work with somatic experiencing, and started studying his work as well. And, from there, I just decided, okay, these are the modalities I want to lead with. And then at the same time, I was also working in the hospitality industry while I was, studying and learning all these different amazing modalities that were healing me on so many levels, things that years of other types of therapy hadn't. And I started bringing even some of this work into the hospitality industry that I was in because I was managing, and it was a very high stress environment, high rates of burnout. And I started applying some of the things that I was learning in polyvagal theory and somatic actually into my role as a manager, and really started to see the impact it had on performance in the team, my own performance, our ability to increase client retention, our ability to communicate with each other, how it impacted revenue. And that's when I realized that this work wasn't just for someone with, like, let's say, a lot of trauma who goes to years of therapy. Like, this can be directly applied to business as well. Because I was just seeing even the ideas I was coming up with for the restaurant, those ideas I knew were connected to the fact that my nervous system was more regulated. So then I decided that, okay, I'm going to merge these two worlds, and business and the nervous system. And so I opened up a coaching practice and decided to, begin working with those in leadership positions to regulate their nervous systems so that they too could have those sustainable results in their business. So without the burnout, to be able to be present with their families, to be able to increase revenue in a way that didn't sacrifice wellness.
That's an amazing experience. And I totally agree that a lot of the time your journey starts off from a personal need and it just like evolves from there. I don't know if those tuning in have experienced this, but I know personally I have. So it's just so interesting to hear your story and how yours has evolved the same way.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. It really is amazing to kind of look back even now and to see how this has evolved and how it connected to so many different aspects of my journey. And even now, like being able to, work with others. I don't just work with leaders too. I work with, even just professionals who are maybe in the corporate environment and who are, the burnout rates are extremely high right now. They're even higher than they were mid-pandemic. And each time I meet with somebody that is in that place, it actually offers just them so much relief when they begin, same as it did for me, when they start to understand what's actually happening and why. It's even just becomes so much more regulating, just having the information and the context for what's occurring, and also giving them, of course, ways to work with it in a way so they don't feel so powerless anymore.
I love that so much because even me personally, last year was a very deep rut or burnout. I don't know what it was, but it was like very overwhelming trying to figure out like why am I feeling this way? Why am I behaving this way? Like, why am I reacting this way? And I was like, of course, I'm always like in therapy. I'm always like a pro, pro therapy person because it's very beneficial. But I just didn't feel like it was making any changes as quickly as I needed it to. So I started doing more research and I found RRT. I haven't tried the somatic one, which is on my radar, and I definitely want to dive into that as well. But I've tapped into RRT, which even just conversations with the therapist around like the neuro parts of behaviors and past traumas and like why my brain is behaving this way and why I'm like reacting to things in certain ways, like just understanding it alone has made such a huge impact.
Oh, I love that, Jessica. Yeah, it does make such a big impact. And one of the 3 C's that we talk about in nervous system work, that Deb Dana, she's one of the colleagues of Stephen Porges' work with the polyvagal theory. She's a therapist, and she coined it the 3 C's: that context, connection, and choice. That's what we need for nervous system regulation. And you have context now. And that's the first C, is that context. It does offer a bit of stabilization once you have that, because without the context, it feels more chaotic, and that then it leads to more stress and dysregulation.
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming when you don't understand it, but when you do, it kind of like alleviates a little bit of that stress and that chaoticness, like you said, inside, and then you're able to focus a little bit more on what you need to do to navigate it, type thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we dive more into your expertise, I just kind of want to touch on the entrepreneurial perspective. So you you had all this experience, you've been, working on your own development and whatnot, and now you're wanting to launch a business. Now, did you ever have the thought that you would become an entrepreneur with your own business? Like, was it ever an intention or a thought in your brain that eventually you would want to do this? And then what was your experience? So what are some learnings that you've had on the business side? Because it's very different, when you have an idea, you want to serve people, you want to help them, but the business part of it is like a whole other bag of beans, like you got to learn so many other things. You got to wear so many other hats. And it can be challenging at times because you just want to do what you want to do. You want to focus on your zone of genius, but there's so much more to it. So I kind of want to know what some learnings were from you on that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I want to say I always knew on some level freedom was always a top priority for me. I remember ever since I was a kid, it was like I always valued freedom above everything. And so as I was getting older and looking at different career avenues, that was always number one for me. So I remember even part of the reason why I entered the hospitality industry as young as I did was because I felt like I had a little bit more freedom. Like I could work 3 days a week. They were hard days. Like, you worked like maybe 10 hours or whatever, like nonstop, but you would make good money and then you'd have the rest of the 4 days to do other things that you want to do. So I felt like, okay, there was freedom in that. And so when I started, like I said, looking into these other modalities that I was studying, I realized I didn't necessarily want it to do it in the traditional sense. And I still wanted that freedom. So that's when I knew I wanted my own business. Like that was what was going to create that freedom for me. And it's interesting too, because looking back now at the hospitality industry and how much it actually prepared me for it too. So I'm actually really thankful that I had the experience that I did, as hard as it was in the hospitality industry, because for those listening, if you've ever been in that industry, and even if you haven't, I'll just let you know, there's a high burnout rate. And it's due to the fact that there's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of novelty. Every night I was in service, we could have whatever, we had a plan, of course, for the evening, but something would always go awry, always. Mm-hmm. And you had to be able to think quickly and pivot. You had to adapt very, very quickly to whatever was coming at you in the moment. And so I had over 10 years of that experience. And so I would say that was one of the things I think that I really served me then when I first started my business was I wasn't as thrown when the unpredictability came my way, or I wasn't as thrown when I had to quote unquote pivot in some way. Maybe for other people who have been more in a corporate environment, for example, those who I work with who have been more in corporate and then transitioned to entrepreneurship, it's quite a shock actually, because there's been more structure where they were at. There was more quote unquote, a little bit more predictability. And then suddenly you're an entrepreneur and there's a lot of unpredictability and novelty. And it's it can be very overwhelming. Now, that's not to say that it still didn't impact me, because it's still being in a restaurant and running a business are still different. And so I would say some of the learnings in the very beginning for me was to actually slow down, because in the restaurant industry too, it's very fast paced. You're moving very, very quickly. And there you kind of run on this adrenaline, you run on this stress chemistry. And I was realizing when I first started my business that I was still running from some of that. And there was this element of wanting to go faster, but faster doesn't always necessarily equal better. Also, I realized I didn't want to burn out, because I had burned out in the hospitality industry. So I started to see, just even in the first year I started my business, the same patterns that had created my burnout in my previous job were playing out as an entrepreneur. And I said, okay, this is not sustainable. I have to figure out another way to address this, let's call it wiring that I have of how I'm leading and running my business. Because if I look 10 years down the road from now, it's not where I want to be health-wise and my ability to be present with those that I love. So I was fortunate that I, at least I said, had a lot of the tools and the knowledge to be able to recognize the warning signs of what was happening at the very beginning, so that I could then get support for myself. I didn't do this on my own too, by the way. I had the knowledge and I had the skills, but I didn't regulate myself in the first year of my business by myself. I sought out support because I knew that there was only so much I could do on my own because our nervous systems wire to each other. We don't wire alone. So me trying to like rewire my system in isolation by myself, I was only going to get so far. So I was really fortunate that I recognized that in the first year or so and got support for myself so I could shift that pattern of living on adrenaline and being able to take my time, being able to be patient. Also, because I had a lot of innovative ideas, and innovation takes patience because generally the ideas that you're conceiving are things that maybe the collective yet hasn't caught up to. So you have to be patient in that process. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say in terms of my own journey with it. I very fortunate that I had the experience, like I said, in the hospitality, so I wasn't as thrown when I came into entrepreneurship. And at the same time, I still found myself falling into some of the same patterns that I had played out that led to my burnout when I was in hospitality, but thankfully recognized it within that first year and got support. Made all the difference.
I love that. And patience is absolutely key. I think we get caught up in things, especially at the beginning, and we're wanting to do it all and put everything out. And that can definitely lead to a lot of overwhelm and stress. And again, like you said, burnout. And, just it doesn't need to move so quickly.
Yes, 100%. I think, and there's something too about the power of patience. And I just want to share this too, that when I shifted my nervous system out of this now not to say that you still can't move quickly. Like, I'm not saying I moved in at a snail's pace. It was like, I moved with so much intention that when I did make a move, like it landed, I guess is what I mean. Like, it wasn't just moving for the sake of moving. It wasn't just going fast to go fast. There were moments I needed to speed up, and I did. And I knew when that moment was. I could feel it in my body. I could feel it in my system as to when to hit the acceleration and when to pull back. So that's what I mean too. Like, it's not that you either go slow or you go super fast. It's like there's a timing involved. And I got really good at knowing what that timing was. And the patience aspect too is I realized that the more I exuded that in my presence and in my nervous system, that I wasn't in a hurry, like a lot of entrepreneurs generally are, the more opportunities also came my way because people sensed that from me. Like when I was around them and having conversations and they didn't feel this urgency from me that then triggered their system, they actually felt quite stabilized speaking to me. There's so much power in that. And they almost were like kind of curious, like, like, why is she so like okay with just taking her time? Like, there was something in that people wanted to be more around. And so I'm thankful for that aspect too of the patience, because then, like I said, more doors and opportunities opened for me because I wasn't pushing all the time. And I wasn't in this constant anxiety of missing out or losing something.
I love that you brought that up because I kind of sensed that a little bit from the way that you speak. And I felt that instantly with you, where I'm like, there's like a sense of calm. Like there's no rushing this conversation. There's no rushing. You just kind of feel very grounded.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
I don't know if everybody tuning in can feel this, but I feel very at ease when I'm talking to Laura, which is probably why I asked you to do a podcast episode after the Instagram live, because I'm like, I have to continue talking to you.
I love that. Thank you for that reflection. Yeah, it's and like I said, you can also, and I want to say to anyone out there who's like maybe has a personality, maybe you're like you have a lot more energy or you're very enthusiastic, that's amazing. And so when I'm working with people, I never tell them like, we're going to just make you calm all the time and you're just going to like lose that kind of like excitement and enthusiasm. No, like you can still have all of that. And then I welcome it as part of you, but it's like, like it's about timing your efforts. And so as an entrepreneur, if you're going to play the long game, which for most people, I would say they got into this wanting to play the long game, meaning they want long-term wealth and, a long-term business, one that's not going to just fade out after 1 to 3 years, which a lot of businesses fail after the first 3 years, unfortunately, due to burnout. That if you want this for the long haul, then you really have to know how to time your efforts and how to speak to people where they feel comfortable with you, that you're a good communicator, that you can articulate the value of your work so that more doors can open for you. And actually recently I had a big door that opened for me that took years for that door to open, but I had to be really patient. And so that's where the nervous system regulation came in to help me give me that patience, because I knew it was going to come at some point, but I had to wait. I just recently partnered with a cardiologist from Stanford who wants to, we're going to be co-publishing a booklet together about the nervous system and HRV and how it impacts your wellness. So just to have someone of that, status, let's say, right, from Stanford, who's interested now in wanting to bring more nervous system work into what he does with his clients and patients, is just incredible, and an opportunity that came because of my nervous system, because of my ability to time my efforts.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to dive into your expertise. We're going to dive in more into this now. So let's start off with the groundwork, right? So what exactly is a nervous system? What is a vagus nerve? I hear that term all the time. Are they the same thing? Can you break it down exactly what all of thlet's things are?
Yeah, absolutely. These are great questions, because there's definitely a lot of these terms being thrown around right now. And so for those who don't know, let's dive into it a little bit more. So when we're talking about the nervous system, so I'm talking about the autonomic nervous system, which means automatic, essentially. So it's in charge of your breathing, your digestion, all the things you don't have to think about, thankfully, your heart rate variability, your heartbeat. And so your autonomic nervous system it runs on a hierarchy, essentially a hierarchical state. So if you were to think of it in terms of a ladder, the top of the ladder would be your ventral vagal state. This is your state of safety. This is your state of connection. This is where you feel generally at peace. Your system feels safe. It's getting cues of safety. And we can talk more about that in a moment. But this is where we were primarily designed to live from, is from that state of safety. Because when we're in that state, our prefrontal cortex, part of our brain, is more available to us. It's more online. It's not, if that's the region of our brain, the higher region of our brain. It's not the survival brain. So we want that online as much as possible, especially if you're a business owner. And so the top of the ladder is the ventral vagal state. So, and then you go, let's say a cue. Now the system picks up a cue of a threat. So then you're going to go down the ladder one step or two steps, and now you're in fight or flight. Most people are aware of this term or heard this term before. So either fighting the threat or fleeing from the threat. And so this is when our body will start to pump more blood to the heart and to the lungs, and we get more adrenaline and pumping through our system in order to, again, get us to either fight the threat or to run from it. And then if that doesn't work, or essentially if the system says, okay, we tried to fight or we tried to flee, and we're still sensing a threat, then the system is going to go what's called a dorsal vagal response, which is a shutdown response, where now the system goes, okay, we can't run from the threat, we can't fight the threat, so we're just going to shut off, essentially. We're going to, when you remember, you see animals in nature, like a possum, where they're pretending they're dead when they're still alive, but they freeze in front of the predator. Well, that's essentially what our nervous system's doing. It's going, okay, we need to conserve energy. We need to there's really nothing more we can do essentially at this moment to fight it. So we're just going to essentially kind of go offline for a bit. And then there's blended states in between, but those are the three primary states. So we have your state of safety, which is your ventral vagal state, and then the sympathetic state of fight or flight, and then the dorsal vagal shutdown response, which is actually, by the way, a part of your parasympathetic nervous system. So there's the parasympathetic, the rest and digest that most people are aware of, and then a branch of the parasympathetic is actually the dorsal vagal shutdown response.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about fight, flight, freeze. Mm-hmm. I've heard fawn before. Mm-hmm. What is fawn?
Yeah, so fawn is an aspect of the system, what you would call more like people pleasing. So it's an element of trying to appease in order to fight the threat. So it's I would say it would fall into more of like what we call a blended state of the shutdown response, mixed with a little bit of that mobilizing energy, because essentially I mean, the mobilizing because you're trying to do something, you're trying to act, right? Maybe by saying something or doing something to appease the person or the situation that you're in order to try to find safety again. So again, all of these survival responses like fight or flight or fawn or shut down, essentially everything that the system is doing is trying to get you back to safety. I mean, that's the intention. So it's protecting you. All of these states are protective mechanisms. So fawn is one of them as well, where the nervous system learned that, and there's various ways that it can learn this, but the system learned that the way to get back to safety is to appease, is to be agreeable, essentially, to other people or situations in order to be safe. And so, but there's an element then of needing to kind of shut down other parts of yourself in order to do that. So that's where the shutdown part comes in.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, as a business owner and a CEO, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but how can a dysregulated nervous system, how can it impact you as a business owner, as a CEO of a business and a team? Like, I kind of want to dive into that to really make it clear how critical it is for you to also focus on this, in like coinciding with business activities in order to move yourself forward towards your goals.
Yeah, this is a great question, Jessica, and one that I love talking about, because there's so much involved in this. Because again, we go back to what I said at the beginning, which was this the nervous system is the CEO of your business. Like it's literally not just your business, your life. I mean, it's how you make decisions. It's what influences your mindset and your beliefs. What influences your ability to handle or manage stress, your resiliency, your ability to make decisions, your type of leadership, and your creativity and innovation. So when we're looking at the nervous system in terms of how you're running a business, so let's say you're in a survival response. And again, there's a reason probably why your system's in that response. So we don't make it wrong or bad, but we do need to recognize that what are some of the signs of your system being in a survival response. So I want to just briefly talk about what that looks like. And then I want to talk about the elements of then like how that impacts your business. So for example, if you're in a survival state, you're going to have difficulty delegating. There's going to be an element of your nervous system that feels like maybe it isn't safe to delegate to other people. You have to do everything yourself. I see this with a lot of entrepreneurs, this hyper independence aspect, and this element of not feeling safe. Again, their nervous system's not cognitive. Their nervous system doesn't feel safe giving over certain tasks. So they feel like they have to do everything themselves in order for it to be right. Another thing is you keep adding more to your plate, even though you're already feeling overwhelmed. So kind of like similar thing, you have difficulty delegating, and then maybe you're having difficulty saying no to requests, and you just continue to kind of just keep adding things to your plate, even though you already are, have a full schedule and you're already like, doing multiple things, you're multitasking all the time, right? So you're definitely overwhelmed. There's an element of you don't know how to stop worrying or overthinking, even though things look good on paper, quote unquote, good on paper. So I've talked to entrepreneurs who are highly successful in terms of revenue, but yet they can't sleep at night. They wake up with ruminating thoughts. They're going to lose it all, that the clients are going to leave them, that whatever post they just posted on something, that maybe someone is going to disagree with them and then cancel them. These are all aspects of your nervous system being in a survival state. There's an element too of you feeling guilty for taking time off or resting, even if you're sick. So I've also seen entrepreneurs who they're on 24/7, which on one level I get, right? Because you're running all these different elements. Like you're the marketing person, you're the PR person, or maybe eventually you delegate some of these tasks out to other people. But especially if you're first starting a business, you're wearing multiple hats. And so you're the coach, or depending on your business, but if you're a coach, you're doing that, you're seeing clients, and you're also looking at marketing, and you're also doing accounting, you're doing PR. So there's a lot of hats to wear. And so essentially there's an element of the system never in your brain never turning off. It's like even at night when you're supposed to be resting or kind of coming down for the day, you're coming up with more ideas and ways to try to market something. And it like never feels like you can rest. There's also an element of being very self-critical, like having a very harsh inner critic. And I'm sure a lot of people maybe listening can identify with this, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, where even though you're maybe an expert in your field, yet you still doubt yourself. You're still like, maybe you go into a meeting and you make a presentation, or if you're an entrepreneur, maybe you just led a workshop or something, and right afterwards you're just critiquing yourself like crazy, like, oh, no, this has sounded stupid, or I don't think I don't think I did a good job, or people didn't seem very engaged, or they don't seem to really maybe really like what I had to say. Like there's just such harsh criticism over yourself and what how you're delivering things or doing things. So anyway, so that I could share more, but I feel like some of those are some of the top ones. And then also this element of everything feels very urgent. Like we talked about, like I have to do everything right now. If I don't act now, I'm going to lose something, or I'm going to miss out on something. Clients are going to be upset with me, whatever. So all of this impacts your business, because if you're living in survival, like these are some of the signs, like I just mentioned, of your system being in a survival state, you aren't going to have as much access, like I mentioned, to that cortex part of your brain, which is responsible for strategic thinking, innovation, creativity, empathy, and your ability to connect, right? We need all that fully available to us as entrepreneurs, because that is what is going to give us long-term sustainability, not just in terms of revenue, but also in terms of our health and wellness, because our nervous systems were not designed, our body and our brain was not designed to live in survival 90% of the time, which unfortunately, I meet a lot of entrepreneurs, that's primarily where they're leading and running their businesses from, is that survival state.
I don't know if anybody else is feeling this, but just hearing you run down that list, like that's exhausting. Just hearing all that, like just hearing it alone is exhausting. So if you're living from that state, imagine how much energy you're wasting on the wrong things. Like how critical it is for you to be able to focus on your nervous system and getting it back into shape so that you can pour that energy into things that are going to move you towards that life and, business that you aspire to have.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Jessica, because it does take a lot of energy. You hit the nail on the head. And again, there's a reason for it, right? It's the system is detecting a threat. And so it's trying to protect you. So it's, your system's going into fight or flight, or maybe freeze, or maybe a form of shutdown, whatever it might be. But that does take a lot of energy from the system to be in survival. And it's, our bodies and our brains are so amazing in that it's very efficient. So it's looking at, and again, this is all subconscious. It's not a conscious thing that you're thinking about. The system just does this automatically for you. And so the thing is, it's like it's assessing, okay, if it's perceiving a threat, it's going to say, okay, we need to allocate as much energy as we can to fight the threat. But then that energy then can be allocated to other higher aspects of your brain, right? That's what really actually pushes your like you said, your business forward, is the strategy, being able to be strategic and think long term, and your ability to be patient, your ability to be an effective communicator, your ability to say no in high stakes negotiations, your ability to be creative and innovative. You're going to lose so much of that because your system is going to prioritize survival. And so you're just not going to have as much resources available to you.
Okay, there's so much more that I'd like to dive in, but I'm going to keep the time in mind here. When it comes to living in this state, and some people are not always aware, because it might just be like unconscious behind the scenes type thing, like apps on your phone kind of running behind the scenes. If they've been in this state for so long, how do they come to realize or become aware that there's an issue?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because you're right. A lot of this is very automatic. Like I said, it's an automatic response. It's somewhat subconscious, right? It's not always in your conscious awareness. These things. So I think
Mhm.
the first thing would be, and so usually what I do with clients is what I do with them is called mapping their nervous system. So we begin to look at, well, first of all, I give them examples of what, like we talked about earlier, like what does fight or flight look like in general? What are some of the thoughts that usually come with a nervous system that's in fight or flight? Because most people are very thought oriented. It's sort of even how our culture has talks about self development is more from a cognitive base, mindset base. And so usually it's very helpful for people and my clients to see first like what thoughts are associated with each state, so they can begin to recognize like, oh, when I have that thought. Like, for example, there's not enough time. That's a fight or flight response. That's a sign that your system's in fight or flight. So then they can say, oh, okay, if I have the thought that I'm running out of time or there is no time, I'm in fight or flight. So you begin to kind of map like what is the content of my thoughts or my beliefs to know what state your system is in. And then kind of going from there, then going a little bit deeper too, and like beginning to map like when I'm in fight or flight, my business feels what. And so sometimes I will have them look at that, like, okay, when you look at your, let's say you're looking at your accounts for the week, like, or for the quarter, what do you notice happening? Where do your thoughts go? Like, are you going to run out of money? Are you you need to work harder? You need to go faster? Like, are you having those types of thoughts? Are you noticing that you're feeling like tightness in your jaw or in your shoulders? Just trying to become aware of like what's happening to you with your body in these different situations or scenarios. So first, mapping your system is what's called mapping your system to know where it goes in different situations and with different people. Because again, your system's going to be impacted depending on the environment and the situation as to where it goes. And then from there, giving you very customized tools for that specific state, for that specific situation, let's say. So I've had clients who, for example, go into a lot of freeze when they're in high stakes negotiations, meaning they don't know how to speak up for themselves. They don't know how to say no. And that, of course, costs them money when that happens. So when they become aware of that, they know, okay, I'm going into freeze when I go into these meetings, or if I'm meeting with like a potential client or something like that, and I'm not able to really highly articulate my services or my value or whatever, because my system's going into freeze, giving them tools to help signal to their system some safety so it can begin to slowly move out of that state of freeze and bring more of their prefrontal cortex online.
Okay. What are some tools, some practices, modalities, things like that we can get started with that can help us begin that process of regulating our nervous system? What
Yeah,
would you recommend?
there's quite a few. So I always recommend, again, things that are usually very simple. We got so much on our plate these days, and so simple meaning something that isn't going to take you more than just a couple minutes, because again, the system is going to look at how much energy do I need to produce, right, in order to do this activity or this thing. So everything I'm going to list here now are things that literally take you 1 to 2 minutes. So something that your nervous system can get on board with, knowing that that's not going to take a lot of time or energy. So one of the first things would be to, and again, this also depending on where your nervous system goes, but one of the first things would be to change your posture. So your posture really impacts the state of your system. So let's say most of us are sitting most of the time, right, at our desks. And so maybe like after a couple hours, your shoulders are kind of hunched over, maybe because you're hunching over the keyboard, or you're looking down at your phone. Also, that this aspect of looking down all the time also can signal a threat to the system. So even just lifting your head up, like towards the ceiling, and moving your eyes slowly around the room for 30 seconds can then again send that direct signal to your brainstem that, hey, we're not in danger. And the system can begin to shift a little more out of that state of, let's say, freeze that it might be in at that moment. Or even just standing up, like literally just stand up from your desk, turn your head up, like look up towards the horizon. So, keep your eyes level, but like looking more up, and same thing, like look around your environment for 30 seconds, and then you can sit back down. But you're sending that cue, and you've also changed your position, your posture. Another thing you can do with your system to help regulate it is, especially if you work from home, is to have a separate workspace from your living space if possible. Even if you live in a really small, tiny apartment, let's say you don't have a separate, like, let's say bedroom or office, you can still maybe like put a screen or something up to kind of corner or section off that area where you work from the rest of your living space. This is very important because, for a lot of us working from home these days, is the system, again, it gets cues based on our environment. So if you are, let's say, working from bed, and then you also are then at night then trying to relax and go to sleep, your system is associating everything you did with work that day. And also then you're also now trying to come down and go to sleep, and it can't because the system thinks we're working, if that makes sense. So we need to give it new associations. So environment is a big one. So maybe like having an area of your, like I said, your home where it's just for work, and or getting out of the house once in a while and going to an area where you can work around other people. Because like I mentioned, we wire to each other. So if you notice, for example, you have trouble focusing during the day, or you're procrastinating, or you're finding that you're having a difficult time maybe getting certain things done, that can be a sign your system's in freeze. And so it needs to be around other people. So maybe just getting out and going to a coffee shop. And I've had clients do this and they go, I got so much work done in 1 hour at the coffee shop than I did like 4 hours at my house. And that's because they were around other nervous systems who were also working and moving and doing things, if that makes sense. So I would say that's another aspect too, is getting out of your house, being around other people and working around other people, cornering off a section of your home that's just for work, changing your posture, getting up, standing up, looking around your environment. And then some other things you can do too is, working with your vagus nerve, which I know you mentioned earlier, which is your 10th cranial nerve. It's one of the longest nerves in your body that runs from your brainstem. It goes all the way into like your throat and down into your heart and down into your digestion. It's it's called the wandering nerve. So one way you can work with this nerve that's really helpful is to press your tongue to the roof of your mouth and hold it there for, maybe 10 seconds, and then do that a couple times, maybe like do it like 3 times. So it's like 30 seconds, and that's engaging the nerve. And it's also, when you press your tongue to the roof of your mouth, you're engaging these calming cranial nerves. So that's also signaling to the brain, okay, we're not in survival at the moment. Like you're signaling safety essentially when you're doing that. So doing that when you're working throughout the day, or maybe when you're cooking dinner for your kids, or maybe you're in line at the grocery store and you're noticing yourself feeling maybe stressed or impatient, or, whatever, like maybe feeling slightly disconnected or numb even, that would be a good one to do too. And it's something it's great to do because no one knows you're doing it. So you can kind of bring it anywhere. It's a great tool. And I think one of the last ones too that I'll mention that can be really helpful, if you're noticing that the feeling of the urgency really coming in strong, like your mind is racing with all the things you need to do, is I would shake out your hands for 30 seconds, like really just shake out your hands and arms, actually move your body. Oftentimes I see people who have a lot of, let's say, anxiety, try to immediately go to calm right away, but the system is highly mobilized in that moment. So you actually need to move. You actually need to kind of do something with the body, as opposed to just trying to slam on the brakes by going to a meditation or trying to calm yourself right away. In fact, that can actually increase anxiety when you do that. So if you're noticing the racing thoughts or the overwhelm coming in, just shake out your arms and your hands, or your legs too, if you want, for 30 seconds, and then just notice how you feel. And then you can maybe take another step of maybe, taking a breath, or, going for a walk. Or if you want to go to a meditation, then you can, but really work with some of that mobilizing energy first.
Those are amazing tips. And I love that they're easy. They're
Yes.
easy and they're short to implement, which is always the first step, right? So after we've done this and we want additional support, what do you have available for us?
Yes, so a couple exciting things. So first off, if you want to work with me one-on-one, I am taking a couple new clients at the moment. So there's a link in my bio on my Instagram where there's an intake form you can fill out there, and we can connect to see if we're a good fit to work together one-on-one. So I do work with clients one-on-one, I have 3-month packages, 6-month packages, and then a year long. And I don't do less than 3 months just because of the nature of this work and how our brains are wired. We need 62 to 68 days to form a new neurobiological pattern. But anyway, so if you want to inquire about one-on-one work with me, you can shoot me a message and I can send over that intake or that link for you. And then I have a really exciting program coming out for those of you who just want to learn more about your nervous systems, also regulate your own system, and also learn how to actually do this for your clients as well. Take them deeper, work at the nervous system level. My colleague and I, Kate Ross, put together a program called Neurosomatics that's going to be starting in September of this year. And there's a link to in my Instagram, my social media bio, that you can click on if you want to schedule a call with us, and we can go through more of details of the program. But this is a program I have had the vision for years that has now come together, and I'm super excited for it because it's going to be for coaches, anyone actually in the human transformation space. You don't have to be a coach. You can even be an executive in a corporate office who just wants to know how to regulate more of your own system, how to also, help regulate the systems of those around you. Also, we're going to be having what's called strategy labs in there too, in this program, where you're going to actually learn how to take this work into other industries. So we're going to really teach you, because Kate and I both work with a lot of corporate clients. And so we're going to teach you how to talk about the nervous system to, let's say, corporate and B2B, so you can land more of those types of clients, which actually also do create a lot more sustainability in your business, because usually these are longer term contracts that pay a lot more too. So there's a lot of more predictability and income when you can work with, B2B or corporate clients, as opposed to just one-on-one or just being in the coaching industry. So we're going to really be teaching you what that looks like and how to do that, and how to begin to work with some of these larger enterprises and take this work in.
Amazing. All right. Well, I will have all of her contact information in the show notes for you guys tuning in. But thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time to join us and for sharing your expertise on this very important topic. Entrepreneurship is more of a self-development journey than anything else from my perspective. So this is a key area to focus on. So thank you for helping us get a better understanding of it.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
Thank you for joining us today. Your presence truly elevates Love Unplugged into a home for freedom-driven women who aspire to be visionary CEOs. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd be honored if you take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us bring more impactful conversations to our community. Let's continue to grow this empowering community together. Until next time.